"Don't talk," the prisoner whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. Yet it cut through the stillness of the night like a knife. Officer Maria Santos froze, hand hovering near her holster, heart pounding in a rhythm that felt louder than the humming fluorescent lights above. At first, she assumed it was just another inmate playing games, trying to unsettle her as so many had before. But then she noticed his eyes, wide, urgent, and terrified, and a cold realization swept over her. This wasn't a game. Something was terribly wrong tonight, and she might already be in the middle of it. The corridors of Harris County Detention Center had always been predictable to her, and 8 years of walking these hallways had taught her every shadow, every whisper, every attempt at manipulation. She could read people, gauge their moods, and anticipate the tricks inmates would try to pull. And yet, despite all her experience, this moment unsettled her in a way nothing else had. There was an unnatural silence that night, a vacuum where the usual noise of restless prisoners should have been. It felt like the jail itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Maria took a slow step closer, instinct and training battling the gnawing anxiety in her chest. The prisoner, Marcus Williams, had always been quiet, unassuming, the kind of inmate that faded into the background. He read, he kept to himself, he caused no trouble. But now his presence felt different. His body was tense, beads of sweat gleaming on his forehead even though the air was cold. His voice when it came was not demanding or threatening, it was desperate. "There's going to be trouble," he whispered, eyes darting down the corridor as if shadows themselves might listen. "They're waiting for you. And it's bad," Maria's mind raced. Threats in a jail were never hypothetical. They were precise, calculated, deadly. She had faced angry inmates, attempted assaults, and even manipulative mind games designed to trap her. But something about Marcus's urgency told her this was different. This wasn't bravado, or a test, or a ploy. This was real. Her training told her to call for backup, to signal for help immediately. Her instincts, however, screamed that doing so might trigger exactly what Marcus feared, turning a hidden ambush into a massacre. She realized in that instant that the prisoner she had always dismissed as harmless might be the only person capable of saving her. Her pulse quickened, not just from fear, but from a strange surge of hope. Could someone on the inside, someone she never expected, truly understand the danger in a way no one else could? Could trust emerge in the darkest, most unlikely place? As Marcus's eyes locked with hers, Maria felt the weight of choice pressing down on her. One wrong move, and everything could collapse. Yet despite the fear gnawing at her, a sliver of clarity pierced through. The truth he held would change everything. And if she stayed, if she listened carefully, she might live to see the shocking revelations unfold. This was not just a night shift. It was a crossroads where courage, instinct, and human connection collided. And for Maria, the first lesson had just begun. Officer Maria Santos had walked these hallways countless times, yet tonight every step felt heavier, every shadow sharper. She had spent 8 years patrolling Harris County Detention Center, learning to read people, predict patterns, and anticipate danger before it arrived. Her training was rigorous, precise, and unrelenting. She knew how to diffuse tension, how to remain calm when others panicked, and how to act decisively when seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Yet, as she moved through the echoing corridors, flashlight in hand, she couldn't shake the unease crawling up her spine. Something about this night felt different. Something felt off. The jail was quieter than usual. Usually, the low hum of restless inmates, the clanging of metal doors, and the occasional shout provided a rhythm, a sense of predictability. Tonight, there was none of that. The hallways stretched in a hollow silence, broken only by the faint buzzing of fluorescent lights overhead. The smell of disinfectant mingled with the cold, metallic tang of steel, creating an environment both sterile and oppressive. Every door Maria passed was locked tight, every window barred and shadowed. Yet the very emptiness of the space seemed to breathe a subtle warning into the air, a whisper that danger was near even if it had yet to reveal itself. She adjusted her holster, fingers brushing the smooth grip of her firearm, reminding herself that training could only take you so far. The real test was instinct, awareness, and the willingness to trust what the body sensed before the mind could rationalize it. In these moments, when the predictable rhythm of the jail was disrupted, she relied on her intuition like a finely tuned instrument. A seasoned officer learned to spot the flicker of unease in a prisoner's eyes, to hear the hesitation in footsteps echoing down a corridor, to detect the subtle changes in air pressure or movement that might signal imminent threat. And tonight, all of those instincts were screaming quietly in the background, telling her to pay attention, to remain vigilant, and to notice the small things that could mean life or death. Marcus Williams was not an inmate who drew attention. He was quiet, methodical, the kind of prisoner who blended into the background and rarely caused trouble. Most officers hardly noticed him, and that was precisely how he liked it. He read, he followed rules, he kept his thoughts to himself. But tonight, even from a distance, Maria sensed a tension in him that was unusual, almost palpable. He lingered near the bars of his cell longer than usual, eyes flicking toward the end of the corridor with a watchfulness that seemed urgent and unnerving. Something had changed, and Maria's heart picked up pace at the sight. Could he sense the same danger she felt? Or was he agitated by some mundane frustration? As she approached his cell, Marcus's posture was stiff, shoulders squared, hands gripping the bars lightly but firmly. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced with a tautness that made Maria pause. There was a subtle shake in his hands, a nervous energy that contradicted his composed expression. The prisoner she had always dismissed as harmless now radiated a quiet intensity that demanded attention. Maria knew this feeling all too well, the kind of premonition that arises when someone sees more than they should, when the pieces of a hidden puzzle begin to align, and when ordinary routines suddenly feel fraught with unknown peril. Maria took a slow, deliberate step closer, careful not to provoke any sudden movements. The flashlight in her hand cast long shadows down the corridor, highlighting the sterile walls and cold steel doors, yet failing to illuminate the unease that lingered in the air. She could almost hear the silence whispering warnings, messages only the trained ear could discern. Her mind raced, weighing possibilities. Was Marcus nervous about something in the jail itself? Had there been a brewing conflict she hadn't yet noticed? Or was there something more sinister, something hidden that only he had seen? Despite her experience and confidence, a chill ran through her spine. She realized, with a clarity that both unnerved and focused her, that Marcus might hold information vital to her safety. The quiet tension between them was thick, a palpable energy that signaled both threat and potential salvation. For the first time in years of patrolling these corridors, Maria felt the full weight of vulnerability, not just as a police officer, but as a human being navigating an environment where control was an illusion. And yet, intertwined with the fear was a spark of hope, a subtle understanding that sometimes the most unlikely individuals could become unexpected protectors, that insight and courage could emerge from the most unassuming places, and that listening, truly listening, could be the difference between survival and disaster. Maria's eyes met Marcus's, and in that instant, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. She could feel the story unfolding, the night shifting from routine to a moment that would demand every ounce of her focus, courage, and intuition. The calm she had relied on for years was giving way to something more profound, a heightened awareness, a readiness to confront not just the known dangers of the jail, but the unknown forces poised to disrupt it. And as she steadied her breath and prepared for whatever revelation Marcus would share, she understood that the night ahead was no longer ordinary. It was a turning point, a collision of perception, instinct, and hidden truths that would challenge everything she thought she knew about control, danger, and trust. Maria's pulse quickened as she leaned closer to Marcus, her instincts honed over years of patrol and observation now screaming at her to pay attention. He lowered his voice to a whisper, just enough that she had to strain to hear. Yet there was an intensity in his gaze that made her focus every fiber of her being on his words. "Officer Santos," he began, voice tight, controlled. "There's going to be trouble tonight, serious trouble. You can't just walk in like any other night. They're waiting." The words landed like stones in her chest. Trouble in a jail was always possible, but Marcus didn't speak lightly. He had been quiet, unassuming, almost invisible for years. If he was warning her, this was beyond routine danger. Maria's mind raced. She knew Marcus well enough to recognize fear when it was genuine, but she also recognized cunning. He wasn't one to fabricate or exaggerate. The tension in his posture, the quick, deliberate movements of his hands, and the sharpness in his eyes, all signs that he had seen, or at least heard, more than he should. "Who? Which inmates?" she asked cautiously, testing the credibility of his warning while mentally preparing for confrontation. Her voice was calm, deliberate, but beneath it pulsed a sense of urgency. She needed every detail, every scrap of information he had to make her next move. Marcus swallowed, hesitated, then whispered names Maria knew all too well. Big Tony, a hulking figure whose reputation for violence preceded him. Reggie Knives Carter, notorious for concealed blades and sudden attacks. And Deshawn, unpredictable and quick, someone who could turn a minor scuffle into a full-blown riot in seconds. As Marcus listed them, Maria visualized each inmate, their habits, their temperaments, the subtle tells she had memorized over months of observation. She understood the weight of his words. The danger wasn't abstract, it was concrete, immediate, and personal. Then came the weapons. Marcus described improvised knives hidden in laundry carts, metal fragments sharpened into deadly points, even pieces of broken glass cleverly concealed in corners of the common area. Each detail sent a shiver down Maria's spine. She had trained for riots, for ambushes, for sudden eruptions of violence. Yet, the specificity of Marcus's warning made her acutely aware of how unprepared she might be if she ignored it. Her eyes scanned the dim corridor, imagining shadows that could shift into attackers, calculating the distance between herself and potential cover. Could she react fast enough? Could she trust her instincts over the chilling precision of Marcus's intel? Marcus's voice grew quieter, almost pleading. They're planning to strike in the East Wing, right where the cameras are down. It's going to be chaotic. You need to be careful. Trust no one but yourself. And maybe me. The hesitation at the end hung in the air like smoke. Maria could feel the tension coiling inside her chest, the tightrope of decision-making narrowing with every second. She knew she couldn't afford to hesitate, yet she also knew the cost of misplaced trust. Every officer in the jail had learned the same lesson the hard way. Appearances were deceiving, alliances were fragile, and instincts were often the only thing standing between survival and disaster. Her training kicked in, separating emotion from calculation, fear from necessity. Maria recalled every drill, every simulation, every moment where split-second decisions had meant life or injury. She considered Marcus's warning carefully. Was he manipulating her, setting her up for some unseen agenda? Or was he genuinely trying to prevent tragedy, offering a chance few would have expected? The question gnawed at her mind, creating a delicate balance between suspicion and hope. She had to decide quickly, because the night was far from passive. The quiet corridors were deceptive, a lull before the storm. Maria's eyes searched Marcus's, looking for any flicker of deceit. She didn't see malice, only a fierce intensity and something that could almost be called courage, a willingness to step beyond his role as a prisoner to do what was right. Her respect for him grew, tempered with caution. In that moment, she realized that judgment in jail wasn't only about law and procedure. It was about perception, intuition, and the rare ability to recognize when someone, even a prisoner, was aligned with your survival. It was a lesson that danger often came from the predictable, but salvation could appear in unexpected forms. Marcus shifted slightly, leaning closer, as though the walls themselves were listening. If you go to the East Wing alone, they'll be waiting. But if you let me guide you, I can help you avoid them. I know their patterns, when they move, where they hide. I've been watching them for weeks. Maria's breath caught. Weeks he had been monitoring their activity with a precision that rivaled any seasoned officer's. The right irony was stark. Here was a man she had always dismissed, now holding the power to protect her. The realization unsettled her, and yet inspired a strange sense of empowerment. If she could combine her training with his inside knowledge, perhaps she could turn the tables, prevent violence, and regain control of a situation spiraling toward chaos. She weighed the options, understanding the risk. Trusting Marcus meant placing her life in the hands of someone society had labeled dangerous, unpredictable, and constrained. Ignoring him could mean walking unthinkingly into an ambush with no warning, no preparation, no chance. Her chest tightened as adrenaline surged. Maria's decision had to be precise, calculated, and resolute. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions, yet she couldn't let caution paralyze her. She had to act, strategically, swiftly, and decisively. Finally, she nodded, a subtle gesture that carried the weight of life or death responsibility. Marcus exhaled, a hint of relief breaking through the tension. "Good, follow my lead," he whispered. In that simple exchange, Maria felt the gravity of trust, the complexity of human judgment, and the fragile intersection of courage and vulnerability. She knew the night was far from over, that danger waited in the shadows, yet she also felt a spark of clarity. Understanding, partnership, and awareness could turn even the direst threat into an opportunity to survive, protect, and prevail. Every step they would take from this point forward demanded precision. Every decision mattered. And every heartbeat reminded Maria that in moments like this, knowledge, vigilance, and the rare courage to trust someone unexpected were the actual weapons against chaos. Maria barely had time to process the relief of Marcus's guidance before the gravity of his following words hit her like a freight train. "It's bigger than just an ambush," he said, his voice low but urgent. She froze, sensing the weight behind each syllable. In her years as a patrol officer, she had encountered dangerous inmates, impulsive fights, and even isolated riots. But the notion of a coordinated plan that extended beyond the walls of the jail? That was something different. Something she hadn't fully prepared for, despite all her training. Marcus's eyes, usually quiet and contemplative, now burned with a seriousness that made her question every assumption she had about the night ahead. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the familiar patterns of jail life with the dark possibilities Marcus described. He explained that one of the guards, someone she had trusted, someone whose badge she had respected, had been secretly aiding certain inmates. Maria's stomach churned. Betrayal within the walls of law enforcement wasn't just a breach of trust. It was a weapon in the hands of those who wanted chaos. This guard had been quietly coordinating, providing information, concealing contraband, and even looking the other way at critical moments. Each revelation pulled her deeper into a scenario she had never imagined facing. Her training was now pitted against deception and a network she could barely see. Yet every instinct screamed that she needed to act. Marcus's words didn't stop there. He traced the connections outward, showing her that this wasn't an isolated cell of troublemakers, but a web tied to criminal families and external networks. "This isn't just inside," he said, voice tight, leaning closer. "They've got people waiting outside. Escape routes, cars, weapons. They're counting on the chaos we can't see from here. If it starts, it's not just a fight, it's a full-scale breakdown." Maria's chest tightened. She had walked the line of danger countless times. Still, the realization that the threat extended far beyond the prison walls made her feel both exposed and powerless. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited. She had faced unpredictability before, and this was no different. She just had to understand it, anticipate it, and stay one step ahead. Then came the moment that made her blood run cold. Marcus paused, searching her face, his expression shifting into something she had never seen in him, hesitation tinged with a subtle urgency. "Maria, your brother," he began carefully. Her heart skipped a beat. Her brother, involved in one of the criminal families Marcus had mentioned, had no direct connection to the jail itself. Still, in her mind, the pieces fit most terrifyingly. If these networks were moving, if the plan was unfolding, someone close to her, someone she cared about, could be caught in the crossfire. Fear and protective instinct surged through her, and for a moment she felt the weight of helplessness, knowing that the personal stakes had escalated far beyond her own life. Maria's mind spun with questions. How deep did this corruption go? Which guards were loyal? Who could she trust in a place where loyalty was as scarce as daylight in the darkest corners of the cell blocks? Marcus, sensing her tension, laid out the network like a map, tracing the lines of communication, the scheduled movements, and the hidden alliances. Each revelation added clarity but also horror. The carefully constructed chaos, the orchestration of inmates with insiders, made her realize that this night could end in carnage if she miscalculated. Every decision mattered, every second was precious, and every assumption she had made about the jail's security protocols could be shattered in an instant. As Marcus detailed the timing and coordination, Maria felt the full psychological weight of his words. The plan wasn't just about violence. It was about disruption, fear, and gaining leverage. The inmates weren't acting alone. They were a part of a larger machine designed to exploit weaknesses, manipulate authority, and take advantage of every vulnerability. And the corrupt guard? He was a linchpin, the silent hand tipping the balance toward disaster. Maria understood that identifying him, predicting his moves, and countering the network required a level of mental focus that was almost overwhelming. She couldn't afford a distraction. She couldn't afford doubt. Her life, the safety of the staff, and the lives of innocent people depended on her understanding and decisiveness. Then came the revelation that hit her hardest. One of the inmates had a vendetta against her personally. Not random, not accidental, but targeted. Marcus explained that past encounters, slight interventions, and even her reputation in the system had made her a figure of significance in the eyes of these inmates. The attacks weren't just opportunistic. They were calculated, personal, and designed to provoke fear, to destabilize her authority, and to leverage control over others. The enormity of this realization pressed down on Maria, but paradoxically, it also sharpened her resolve. Personal stakes, she realized, were double-edged. They made fear more intense, but clarity more precise. Marcus continued, revealing the logistics that tied the external network to the jail's internal chaos. Vehicles would be staged, communication lines established, and exit points monitored by outside accomplices. It was no longer a matter of defending the prison. It was about anticipating a cascade of events that could spill beyond the walls, endangering the public and anyone remotely connected to the inmates. Each detail he provided, each pattern he traced, made the potential disaster more vivid. The tension in the hallway pressed around her, heavy and almost tangible. Maria felt the weight of her responsibility, the fragile barrier between order and anarchy, and the critical importance of acting decisively without hesitation. And then, in a quieter, almost solemn tone, Marcus revealed a final, personal connection. One of the external players had ties to her family, a subtle but dangerous intertwining of personal and professional worlds. Her protective instincts, already heightened, flared into full awareness. She understood now that the night's events were no longer merely a test of skill, strategy, or courage. They were a trial of identity, trust, and moral clarity. Could she protect those she loved while maintaining her duty? Could she navigate a labyrinth of deception without losing herself in fear or rage? Maria felt the shifting weight of empowerment and responsibility. Marcus had given her knowledge, yes, but it was the kind of knowledge that demanded action, that forced clarity, and that refused the comfort of inaction. She recognized the opportunity buried within the peril. By understanding the network, by anticipating the conspirators, and by trusting selectively, she could turn the orchestrated chaos into a controlled outcome, prevent unnecessary violence, and reclaim authority in a system built on distrust and manipulation. She could transform fear into strategy, uncertainty into foresight, and vulnerability into power. Her mind worked methodically, tracing each potential movement, calculating responses, and aligning her instincts with Marcus's insider perspective. The corruption, the network, the external ties, and the personal threats had created a complex, multidimensional challenge, but one she was now prepared to face. She realized that the night ahead wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding human behavior, reading signals where others saw only shadows, and navigating danger with precision, courage, and resolve. Every heartbeat reminded her of what was at stake: her life, the lives of others, and the fragile balance between order and chaos. Finally, Maria exhaled slowly, centering herself. She understood the magnitude of what Marcus had revealed, the depth of the threat, and the personal stakes that had now intertwined with her professional duty. Her resolve crystallized. She would confront the corruption, anticipate the coordinated attack, protect the innocent, and face the challenges of the night with unwavering focus. And as she met Marcus's gaze once more, she recognized the rare, paradoxical truth that a prisoner, a person society had labeled as dangerous and untrustworthy, had just given her the most valuable weapon she could wield tonight: knowledge, insight, and a chance to survive. Maria's mind raced as she mapped every possible route through the maze of corridors, each shadow and echo now a potential threat. Every decision carried weight, every step a gamble with consequences she could not ignore. She could feel the tension settling in her shoulders, a familiar pressure that sharpened her senses and forced her instincts to the forefront. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting uneven pools of light that played tricks on her eyes, making even the ordinary corners appear sinister. She reminded herself to breathe, to focus, and to trust both her training and the subtle guidance Marcus had provided. The night was a puzzle, and every move had to be precise. As she advanced, Maria's steps were deliberate, measured, yet quick enough to cover ground before the ambushes could materialize. Her ears strained for the slightest indication of danger: a shuffled foot, a hushed whisper, the faint scrape of metal against concrete. Each sound became a signal, a warning, and a potential life-saving clue. Her heart pounded. Not from fear alone, but from the adrenaline of being fully present, fully aware of the razor-thin margin between survival and disaster. How could one woman navigate this labyrinth of threats when every corner could conceal violence, betrayal, or worse? And yet, Maria moved forward, because hesitation in this moment was a luxury she could not afford. Marcus stayed close, silent but alert, moving like a shadow beside her, occasionally signaling when a danger zone approached. She noticed the subtle twitch of his hand, the slight shift in his gaze, small, almost imperceptible cues that could mean the difference between life and death. He had taught her to read the environment, to see what others overlooked, the slight scuff marks indicating hurried movement, the faint scent of smoke where a flame had been smuggled in, the barely perceptible tension in a cell door. Maria realized that survival wasn't just about speed or strength. It was about perception, anticipation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Each corridor became a test of both intellect and instinct. As they approached a particularly narrow passage, Maria felt the walls pressing in on her, both physically and mentally. The confined space amplified the sounds around them. The echo of distant footsteps, the metallic clang of chains, the hum of fluorescent lights vibrating overhead. Each noise could signify an enemy, an ambush, or merely the hall settling. Still, in this charged environment, assumptions could be fatal. She pressed herself against the wall, letting Marcus take the lead momentarily, observing the reactions of those cells they passed. The tension in the air was almost tangible, a living thing that sought to unnerve, to break focus, and to exploit hesitation. Marcus whispered names, subtle identifiers of the inmates they needed to avoid. Each name carried its own reputation, its own potential for violence. Maria felt a cold edge in her stomach as she processed the information. She now had to balance the need for speed with the necessity of discretion. One wrong step, one careless glance, and the carefully laid plan would collapse, and the consequences could ripple far beyond these hallways. Could she navigate this maze without alerting those who sought her harm? Could she anticipate the unexpected without succumbing to panic? Every instinct screamed caution, yet every heartbeat urged forward momentum. They moved with calculated precision, pausing only when the faintest hint of movement demanded attention. Shadows seemed to shift with intention, the dark spaces between bars and doors hiding not just the potential for violence, but the uncertainty of who could be trusted. Maria's mind raced with scenarios, analyzing every possible reaction, every contingency, and every risk. She had to consider escape routes, defensive positions, and the potential for confrontation that could escalate within seconds. Time was an enemy as well as an ally. Decisions had to be instantaneous yet deliberate, as the clock ticked closer to the moment when the ambush could strike. Footsteps echoed closer, and Maria froze instinctively, pressing herself further into the wall, feeling the sweat prickling at her temples. Marcus mirrored her stance, eyes scanning the distance for threats. For a heartbeat, the world seemed suspended, the only sounds the shallow rhythm of her breathing and the distant murmurs of restless inmates. The tension was unbearable, yet it demanded absolute focus. This was not the kind of fear that paralyzed. It was the kind that honed every sense, that sharpened reflexes, and that illuminated the path forward with startling clarity. Maria understood now that the night's success depended on mental acuity as much as physical action. They passed a junction where two ambush points could intersect, forcing Maria to rely on intuition as much as observation. She recalled the briefings Marcus had shared, the indicators he had mentioned, the telltale signs of movement and intent. She calculated the distance, the timing, and the risks, and chose a path that minimized exposure while maintaining momentum. Each step was deliberate, each pause strategic, and each glance measured. She had to anticipate what others could not see, act faster than instinct demanded, and trust both her experience and the rare insight Marcus had provided. The corridors were no longer merely passageways. They were a chessboard where every pawn, every move, and every counter-move could determine survival. As they continued, the tension ratcheted higher. A faint metallic scrape sounded from behind, and Maria's heart jumped. She pivoted slightly, eyes scanning the shadows. Was it one of the conspirators? A random disturbance? She didn't have time to question it. Movement had to continue, decisions had to be made, and hesitation was no longer an option. Her focus sharpened, instincts synchronized with knowledge, and she pushed forward with Marcus beside her, a silent partner in the dangerous choreography. Each narrow corridor, each cell door, each flicker of light became a critical variable, and she had to account for them all without succumbing to fear. They reached a section where the hall branched into multiple paths, and Maria faced the ultimate decision point. Which route would offer the least exposure while still allowing them to reach safety? The mental pressure was immense, but she had trained for high-stakes situations, and now that training collided with real danger. She measured distances, recalled Marcus's insights, and chose a path that combined stealth with speed. Every second counted. Every move mattered. One misstep could unleash chaos and destroy the careful advantage they had cultivated. Yet she moved, deliberate, controlled, and aware, embodying the rare blend of courage and calculation that actual survival demanded. Even as she navigated, Maria's thoughts briefly flickered to the bigger picture. The network of conspirators, the corrupt guard, the external connections, and the potential for disaster that extended far beyond these walls. Survival was not just personal. It was strategic. Each correct step, each avoided confrontation, and each moment of vigilance contributed to maintaining control over an unpredictable situation. And through it all, Marcus remained a quiet, steady presence, offering the subtle insights that allowed her to anticipate, adapt, and endure. Together they moved as a unit, a combination of knowledge, instinct, and courage, navigating the tension-filled corridors with a precision that defied the chaos surrounding them. Maria could feel the weight of the night pressing down on her, yet with each careful step she also felt a sense of empowerment. Fear was no longer just a shadow looming over her. It had become a tool, a focus, and a guide. She understood the necessity of mental discipline, the importance of calculated risk, and the profound responsibility she carried, not just for her own survival, but for the safety of Marcus and the order within the jail. Each moment was a test, each corridor a proving ground, and each decision a reflection of both instinct and intellect. And with every calculated movement, she came closer to asserting control over a situation that had threatened to spiral beyond comprehension. Maria's pulse spiked the moment she saw them. The group of armed inmates, eyes narrowed, hands gripping crude but deadly weapons, bodies tense and ready to strike. The emergency alarm she had triggered moments before now rang in her ears like a death knell, each echo amplifying the stakes. She assessed them quickly, reading posture, expressions, micro-tells that revealed both overconfidence and fear. Could she remain calm when outnumbered and outgunned? She had trained for confrontations, but nothing in her career had prepared her for this intimacy with danger, for the raw proximity of lives hanging by a thread. Every second counted, and every word could tilt the balance between survival and catastrophe. Her mind raced as she realized that brute force would not win this encounter. Intelligence had to be her weapon. She forced herself to breathe, to slow the adrenaline, and to think like a strategist. Could she exploit the tension she had already observed? The subtle rivalries between the inmates, their paranoia, the way fear distorted judgment? Maria knew that even the strongest of adversaries could be manipulated if they believed in an unseen threat or a cunning plan. Her survival depended on turning their aggression against themselves, creating doubt, hesitation, and confusion in the minds of men ready to kill. She spoke first, her voice firm but calm, carrying authority that seemed to reach beyond the chaos. "You don't want to do this," she said, scanning faces, locking eyes with those who seemed most volatile. "Someone higher up is watching. If you make a move, it won't end the way you think." The words were calculated, laced with enough uncertainty to ignite suspicion. She watched as a flicker of doubt passed across their faces, how instinct and fear warred with their desire for dominance. Could they be tricked into believing she knew more than she did? Could she leverage that hesitation into a chance for escape? The leader stepped forward, a man with a scar tracing his jawline, a makeshift blade catching the harsh light. "Who's watching?" he demanded, voice low and dangerous, eyes narrowing as if trying to pierce her very thoughts. Maria maintained her composure, letting the question linger. "People who decide fates," she replied smoothly, keeping her tone even but charged with certainty. She could see the seeds of doubt take root. The way the scarred man's grip tightened only slightly, the glance exchanged with the others that suggested growing mistrust. She understood that fear could be more paralyzing than any weapon in their hands. Each step they took toward her became a mental chess move. Maria carefully measured space and reaction, advancing slightly, retreating strategically, and speaking only when it would maximize tension. If you move, she continued, you won't get another chance to think. And I can tell you, none of you want to see what happens next. The threat was ambiguous yet credible, and in that ambiguity lay her leverage. The inmates' minds began to race with possibilities, imagining consequences that may or may not exist. She watched them question each other, their focus split between her words and their own assumptions. Maria's eyes flicked to Marcus, who had positioned himself slightly behind her, silent but alert, ready to assist or create further diversion if necessary. The knowledge that someone else was prepared to act beside her gave her a subtle confidence. Still, it also reminded her that every decision was immediate and irreversible. One misstep, one misjudged glance, and the calculated tension could explode into violence. She reminded herself that perception often outweighed reality. If she could shape how they perceived the situation, she could control the encounter. She became a conductor of uncertainty, orchestrating hesitation with precision. A sudden step by one of the inmates broke the delicate rhythm of fear she had cultivated. Maria reacted instantly, her tone sharpened with controlled authority. Stop. Do you really want to gamble with lives you don't control? Her voice carried a weight beyond the words themselves. This confidence implied knowledge, strategy, and consequences far beyond their understanding. The leader froze, and she could see the shift, the way power wavered when intelligence met brute force. Doubt spread subtly, like a shadow creeping across the walls, and Maria knew that every second of hesitation increased her advantage. The tension was electric, charged not by the weapons but by the minds facing each other. Maria continued to manipulate the psychological battlefield, using pauses, eye contact, and verbal cues to maintain control. Think carefully, she said, her gaze sweeping across the group. You're risking more than you know. One wrong choice and it won't just be your lives at stake. The consequences reach farther than these walls. The words were vague enough to create anxiety, specific enough to sow paranoia. She could almost see the cogs turning in their heads, the inner dialogue questioning leadership, motives, and potential outcomes. She noticed subtle reactions, the tension in the scarred leader's shoulders, the way one man's hand wavered over a weapon, the hesitation that became contagious. Maria knew this was her moment to turn uncertainty into action. With careful steps, she shifted slightly, closing the distance while maintaining eye contact, asserting dominance not through force but through command. She became the axis around which the room's energy rotated, each motion calculated to maximize hesitation and minimize reaction. Her mind played out scenarios, predicting responses, preempting aggression, and exploiting any fissure of fear. Dialogue became a tool, as potent as any weapon. "You're not here to fight me," she continued, voice low and unwavering. "You're here to survive tonight, just like me. And if we all want to survive, we have to think differently. Don't let pride blind you." The words hit home, mixing truth with psychological manipulation, making them reconsider, weigh consequences, and reassess their actions. Maria could feel a subtle shift in the balance of power, the raw aggression tempered by doubt, the certainty of violence fractured by strategic intelligence. Time became an enemy, yet also an ally. Each passing second increased the pressure on the inmates' decision-making while allowing Maria to consolidate control. Her mind worked faster than instinct alone, anticipating moves before they materialized, using each heartbeat to reinforce authority and generate hesitation. The hallway, once a potential death trap, became her stage, a mental chessboard where intellect outweighed strength. She reminded herself constantly, control perception, exploit doubt, act decisively. Every gesture, every pause, every word had weight and consequence. By the time the final pause came, Maria had turned the tables. The armed inmates were hesitant, uncertain, caught between aggression and self-preservation. Marcus, ever alert, mirrored her readiness, a silent signal that backup was poised if needed. The leader's glare softened, uncertainty creeping into the edges of his confidence. Maria realized that true power was not in weapons or numbers, but in intelligence, composure, and strategic manipulation. She had survived not because she overpowered them, but because she outsmarted them, leveraged fear, and controlled perception with precision. In that moment, the hallway shifted from a battlefield to a testament of resilience, intellect, and courage under unimaginable pressure. The sounds of footsteps echoed down the hall, heavier now, purposeful and coordinated, signaling the arrival of backup. Relief washed over Maria, but she knew better than to let her guard down entirely. Every second counted until the reinforcements fully secured the area. The armed inmates who had been poised to strike moments ago now froze, their bravado crumbling under the approaching authority. Marcus stayed close, alert yet steady, his eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and the unspoken understanding that their survival had depended on trust, strategy, and an almost impossible courage. Maria allowed herself a quiet exhale, the first in what felt like an eternity. However, the adrenaline still coursed through her veins, sharpening her awareness. She could not yet afford complacency, not when the stakes were so high. As the backup arrived, officers moved with precision, separating and subduing the inmates one by one. The once tense hallway transformed into a controlled environment, the chaos replaced by professional order and methodical efficiency. Maria observed from a distance, her mind processing the events, replaying decisions, and analyzing outcomes. Every choice she had made, every calculated word, every step she had taken under pressure had converged to this moment. Marcus remained close, and she could see that his confidence in her decisions had solidified. What had begun as a confrontation that could have ended in tragedy had now become a testament to the power of composure, intelligence, and courage in the face of imminent danger. The aftermath revealed a more profound truth. Investigations uncovered the full scope of corruption within the jail. A guard had colluded with external criminal networks, facilitating what could have escalated into a coordinated riot and even a mass escape. Evidence of collusion, encrypted communications, and hidden alliances came to light, shaking the foundation of trust within the institution. Maria felt a mixture of vindication and sorrow. Vindication because the immediate threat had been neutralized, sorrow because the betrayal ran so deep, compromising the safety of those who depended on the system to protect them. Marcus's warning had been accurate, precise, and critical. It had prevented not only their potential deaths but a much larger catastrophe. The weight of truth was heavy, yet it also reinforced the value of vigilance, discernment, and moral clarity. As the details of the corruption became public, consequences unfolded swiftly. The complicit guard faced immediate suspension, criminal investigation, and eventual charges that would ensure accountability. Inmates involved in the plot were disciplined, and measures were implemented to prevent future breaches of trust. Maria watched the process unfold, aware that the justice served was not simply procedural. It was a confirmation that moral courage could prevail even in systems riddled with complexity and human error. She reflected on how close they had come to disaster, how fragile safety could be when trust is violated, and how critical it is to act decisively when confronted with both danger and knowledge. Marcus, once a prisoner regarded with skepticism and caution, now stood as a figure of redemption and moral clarity. His courage, insight, and willingness to act to protect others had altered outcomes in profound ways. Maria could not ignore the transformative power of his actions. In a world where labels often define perception, prisoner, officer, perpetrator, protector, Marcus had shattered expectations, proving that integrity and courage were not confined to circumstance or social designation. The audience of the situation, Maria included, witnessed firsthand the complex tapestry of human behavior: fear, judgment, loyalty, and bravery interwoven to produce a moment of profound consequence. Sitting in the aftermath, Maria allowed herself to reflect on the personal dimensions of the ordeal. The threat had extended beyond professional responsibility, touching on family connections and the broader implications of systemic corruption. Her choices had carried weight not only for her own survival, but for those she cared about, for the institutional integrity of the jail, and for Marcus's future within a system that had already condemned him to marginalization. The moral clarity required in that hallway, the split-second decisions, the navigation of fear, and the exercise of empathy reminded her that true courage is measured not just by confrontation, but by discernment, strategic action, and moral responsibility. The hallway, now quiet and cleared, stood as a silent witness to the intensity of events. Shadows receded under fluorescent lighting, yet the emotional imprint remained. Maria and Marcus shared a glance, a quiet acknowledgement that transcended words. Gratitude, respect, and understanding passed between them, formed from shared risk, shared survival, and shared ethical clarity. Maria realized that the bond forged in moments of crisis carries a resonance beyond immediate danger. It affirms the power of collaboration, trust, and moral alignment, even across the most unlikely divides. Reflecting further, Maria considered the lessons embedded in the ordeal. Courage, she knew, is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of action despite it. Redemption is not simply forgiveness. It is the conscious choice to act rightly when circumstances allow influence over outcomes. Moral decisions, especially under duress, reveal the essence of character and define the legacy of those who face them. Marcus's actions, her strategy, and the eventual arrival of backup illustrated that integrity combined with calculated decisiveness creates ripples that extend far beyond the moment. These insights were not abstract. They were practical, lived, and proven in the crucible of danger. Maria's experience became a lens through which viewers could examine their own responses to risk, pressure, and moral ambiguity. She asked herself and silently invited the audience to consider, what would they have done in her position? Could they remain composed, make intelligent choices, and act to protect others even when confronted with overwhelming threats? Could they navigate uncertainty, exploit psychological dynamics, and maintain ethical clarity while under imminent danger? These questions lingered, not to judge but to provoke introspection and engagement, fostering a connection between narrative and personal reflection. Ultimately, the ordeal concluded not with violence or tragedy, but with clarity, accountability, and the reaffirmation of human resilience. Maria and Marcus emerged alive, intact, and morally affirmed, a testament to the strength of courage, intelligence, and decisive action. The consequences for corruption were real, the lessons were profound, and the narrative reached closure while leaving lingering questions about judgment, loyalty, and the complexity of human behavior. For viewers, the story offered both suspenseful engagement and emotional resolution, blending the thrill of danger with the satisfaction of ethical triumph. In the quiet aftermath, Maria allowed herself one final thought. Life often demands difficult choices, and the courage to act rightly, even when it risks personal safety, defines who we are. Marcus, once judged by circumstance, became a symbol of that principle, a living demonstration that heroism and redemption can arise in unexpected places. As viewers reflect on this story, they are invited to consider their own values, their potential actions under pressure, and the enduring power of morality, intelligence, and collaboration. What would you have done if you were Maria? Could you have navigated fear, uncertainty, and imminent danger with both courage and clarity? The story closes not merely with an ending, but with an invitation to learn, to reflect, and to measure oneself against the heights of human courage. At Hidden Struggles, we go deeper where emotion meets evidence and drama reveals the system. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.